Am I audible now? Please type yes in the chat box if I am audible to you. Okay. Okay. So let's begin with this session. So dear students, in this session we are going to see one of the most important things in the Indian economy, that is goods and services tax, यानी कि वस्तु एवं सेवा कर. See, government has various functions. It has to develop infrastructure in the country. It has to provide welfare schemes for the people of the country, and for that it needs funds. And funds come through different sources. So when you look at the budget of the government, you will see the two sides, the receipt side and then the expenditure side. Okay, in the receipt side you will find that it is divided into two things. The first is revenue receipts and the second is the capital receipts. Okay, further if you look at the revenue receipts, it are divided or bifurcated into again two heads, that is tax revenue and non-tax revenue. आज का हमारा फोकस होगा टैक्स रेवेन्यू पे और स्पेसिफिकली गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स पे. टैक्स रेवेन्यू के अंदर काफी सारे टैक्स आते हैं. ओके, टैक्स रेवेन्यू हो गया आपका, इसके अंदर डिफरेंट टैक्स आएंगे, सच एज इनकम टैक्स, सच एज कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स एंड सच एज जीएसटी. आज का हमारा जो फोकस रहने वाला है वो होगा गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स पे. ओके, तो आप पहले ये बताएं कि हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू नो व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन डायरेक्ट टैक्स एंड इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स. देयर आर टू टाइप्स ऑफ टैक्सेस. नो, द फर्स्ट इज डायरेक्ट टैक्स एंड द सेकंड इज इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स, प्रत्यक्ष कर और अप्रत्यक्ष कर. सो द डायरेक्ट टैक्स इज दैट टैक्स which is levied on the income or the assets of a person. ओके, तो जो इनकम कर रहा है ये उसके ऊपर ही लेवाय होगा. while indirect tax is generally levied on the consumption of a person. कि आप कोई मार्केट से चिप्स खरीदने जा रहे हैं तो आप उसके अंदर ऑलरेडी टैक्स दे रहे हैं. the consumer is giving tax for that packet of chips, but that tax will be submitted to the government by the manufacturer of that chip. Okay, तो ये है indirect tax और दूसरा होता है direct tax. Now let's see your answers. Maitri saying indirect is on commodities. Good. Direct tax imposition and incidence is on the same, and indirect tax imposition on one and incidence on the other. Very good. Kanu, your definition is correct. So GST यानी कि गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स हमारा आता है इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स के दायरे में. तो आज हम वही देखेंगे कि इनडायरेक्ट जीएसटी यानी कि गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स की बैकग्राउंड क्या रहा है, इसकी क्या जर्नी रही है, इसकी क्या कॉम्पोजिशन होती है, कौन सी काउंसिल इसे मेंटेन करके रखती है और कौन सी रेगुलेट करती है, और हम देखेंगे कि 5 साल की जर्नी में इसके क्या क्या अचीवमेंट्स रहे. We are going to see the journey of GST, the salient features of GST and constitution, what are the constitutional provisions related to GST. We will be seeing the scope of GST terminology like reverse charge mechanism, zero rating, compensation of GST to states, and then we will seeing what is GST Council, the epitome of fiscal federalism in India. After that we will be seeing GST compensation to states, and then 5 years of GST, what are the achievements of GST during these 5 years. Okay, and then we will be practicing 10 MCQ questions for which you will calculate your own marks, and in the end of the session we will see how many marks you got. Okay, so why we took the topic of GST today in this particular session, making it a GST special session, is because there has been plethora of news that is being going on related to GST, such as one nation one tax goods and services tax. इसकी 1 जुलाई को 5th year anniversary celebrate करी. Okay, 5 years on, work is still in progress, the promises, challenges and GST of regime. Okay, so ये 5 साल की सालगिरह से related है GST की. And then at least 12 states say continue GST compensation, no decision taken. See, the GST compensation was promised for 5 years after the inception of GST. regime. But 5 years have ended now. Now the states are asking for continuing the compensation of GST. Okay, so उससे related भी news है. An uncertain transition. As GST compensation ends, state governments need to be provided certainty of revenues. Same thing, same news. Government hikes GST for household items. अब ये किससे रिलेटेड है कि अभी रिसेंटली जीएसटी काउंसिल की जो मीटिंग हुई है उसमें कई सारे डिसीजन लिए गए, जिसमें कुछ कमोडिटीज पे टैक्स बढ़ाया गया और कुछ कमोडिटीज पे टैक्स घटाया गया. तो इतनी सारी न्यूज को हम एक स्पेशल जीएसटी सेशन में कंसाइज करने वाले हैं. सर आपकी टॉपिक वाइज इकोनॉमिक क्लासेस के लेक्चर कहां मिलेंगे? नो, वी आर जस्ट कंडक्टिंग करंट अफेयर्स वीकली और इंडियन इकोनॉमी. ओके, नाउ लेट्स सी फर्स्ट the journey of GST. It started in the year 2000 when the Prime Minister introduced the concept of GST and फिर एक स्पेशल कमीशन सेटअप करी गई उससे रिलेटेड कि जीएसटी में क्या क्या होना चाहिए. ओके, एंड उस कमीशन का नाम था असीम दासगुप्ता कमेटी. असीम दासगुप्ता कमेटी ये कमेटी थी जिसने फ्रेमवर्क तैयार करना शुरू करा जीएसटी का. उसके बाद 2006 में अनाउंसमेंट बाय यूनियन फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर ड्यूरिंग बजट ऑफ 2006 to 7 दैट जीएसटी वुड बी इंट्रोड्यूस्ड फ्रॉम 1 अप्रैल 2010. यानी कि 2010 में ही इसे इंट्रोड्यूस करने का डिसीजन ले लिया गया था, बट डिलेज पे डिलेज होते गए और इसलिए फाइनली जीएसटी आया 2017 में. खैर उसके बाद कई बिल्स इंट्रोड्यूस हुए बट वो लैप्स भी हुए. फाइनली द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन 101st अमेंडमेंट एक्ट was enacted. 101st Constitutional Amendment Act यानी कि संविधान में संशोधन हुआ, उसके बाद जीएसटी को इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया. आप खुद ही देखिए कि गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स कितनी बड़ी चीज है कि हमने संविधान में पूरा संशोधन किया. और क्यों किया हम ये भी जानेंगे अभी. उसके बाद फर्स्ट जीएसटी काउंसिल मीटिंग हुई सितंबर 2016 में. उसने रेकमेंड किया कि सीजीएसटी होना चाहिए, सीजीएसटी यानी कि सेंट्रल गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स. एसजीएसटी होना चाहिए स्टेट्स गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स. आईजीएसटी होना चाहिए इंटीग्रेटेड गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स. एंड देन यूटीजीएसटी यूनियन टेरिटरी गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स एंड कॉम्पनसेशन सेस एक्ट होना चाहिए. तो ये सारी चीज जीएसटी काउंसिल ने रेकमेंड करी. अब रेकमेंड करी तो इन एक्ट को इनेक्ट भी करना पड़ेगा पार्लियामेंट में. तो फिर वही हुआ, ये सारे एक्ट पास हुए अप्रैल 2017 में. जीएसटी काउंसिल ने सारे रूल्स बनाए. उसके बाद एसजीएसटी एक्ट पास हो गया 30 जून को 2017 में और 1 जुलाई को जीएसटी लॉन्च हो गया एट मिडनाइट सेशन. शायद आप लोगों में से कई को याद भी होगा कि एक स्पेशल सेशन बुलाया गया था पार्लियामेंट में. तब हमारे प्रेसिडेंट थे प्रणब मुखर्जी जी और उन्होंने जीएसटी लॉन्च किया 1 जुलाई 2017 को. ओके, नाउ SGST Act passed by the Jammu and Kashmir CGST and IGST ordinances promulgated to extend GST to J&K. तो उसके बाद ट्रू इकोनॉमिक इंटीग्रेशन हो गया क्योंकि जीएसटी अब पूरे भारत में फैल गया था. वन नेशन वन टैक्स ट्रूली. ओके, देन अमेंडमेंट्स कई होते रहे. तो मेन जर्नी हमें याद रखनी है 2000 से लेकर 2017 तक की कि कब इनेक्ट हुआ एक्चुअली में जीएसटी. ठीक है, सो लेट्स मूव फॉरवर्ड. जीएसटी के क्या ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हैं? व्हाई वाज जीएसटी इंट्रोड्यूस्ड? जीएसटी वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड टू मेक इंडिया अ कॉमन मार्केट विद कॉमन टैक्स रेट्स. सी बिफोर जीएसटी देयर वर सेवरल टैक्सेस जो अलग अलग स्टेट्स के अलग अलग होते थे. उनकी दरें भी अलग अलग स्टेट्स अपने हिसाब से डिसाइड करते थे. तो यानी कि इंडिया एक पूरा कंट्री तो है बट उसमें मार्केट्स फ्रेगमेंटेड थे. मध्य प्रदेश में अलग टैक्स रेट था, उत्तर प्रदेश में अलग टैक्स रेट था. तो इससे बिजनेसमैन को दिक्कत होती थी, उनके कंप्लायंसेस बढ़ जाते थे और उन्हें समझने में मुश्किल होती थी कि हमें कहां पर कितना टैक्स देना है. और इसकी वजह से एक हिडन कॉस्ट बन जाती थी क्योंकि उन्हें उसका इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नहीं मिलता था. इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट ये भी अभी हम देखेंगे कि क्या होता है, बट अभी हम इस पे फोकस करेंगे कि क्या ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हैं. मेक इंडिया अ कॉमन मार्केट विद कॉमन टैक्स रेट. अब जीएसटी जब इंट्रोड्यूस हो गया, व्हेन जीएसटी वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड इन इंडिया, नाउ देयर वाज वन नेशन वन टैक्स विद generally four tax slab rates. What are they? What are the tax slab rates of GST right now? Can you answer this in the comments? Can you answer this in the comments? What are the tax slabs of GST? that are generally followed? Please answer this. Kanu is saying 0, 5, 12, 18, 28, 5, 12, 18, 28. Okay. What about others? Please answer. So, general tax slab rates are 5, 12, 18 and 28. 0 is nil, कि उस पर कोई टैक्स हम अप्लाई नहीं कर रही है. That is under GST regime, but we are not applying tax on that. Okay, good. Yes, 5, 12, 18. Anju, there is 28% tax slab also. So, the second objective of GST is improved competitiveness owing to reduction in transaction cost of doing business. What did I just say? कि अब बिजनेसमैन के लिए एक टैक्स है पूरे नेशन के लिए. नाउ उनका कॉमर्स पूरे भारत में आराम से फैल सकता है, जिसकी वजह से उनकी कॉम्पिटिटिवनेस भी बेटर होगी, क्योंकि उनकी एसोसिएटेड बिजनेस कॉस्ट जो हिडन रह जा रही थी, जो वेस्ट हो रही थी, वो अब नहीं होंगी. देयर बिजनेसेस आर मोर एफिशिएंट नाउ. तो इसलिए दूसरा ऑब्जेक्टिव ये था. तीसरा ऑब्जेक्टिव था फॉर्मलाइजेशन ऑफ इकोनॉमी. अब देखिए जीएसटी के नेट में अलग अलग बिजनेसेस आ रहे हैं, ठीक है. अब उन अलग अलग बिजनेसेस का रजिस्ट्रेशन हो रहा है, एक पूरा डेटाबेस क्रिएट हो रहा है. अब इस डेटाबेस का यूज करके गवर्नमेंट ये भी पता लगा सकती है कि कितने फॉर्मल सेक्टर में आ रहे हैं और कितने इनफॉर्मल में आ रहे हैं, कितनी ऐसी इंडस्ट्रीज हैं जो फॉर्मल में आती हैं बट स्टिल बिकॉज ऑफ देयर ओन इंटरेस्ट वो इनफॉर्मल में अपने आप को दिखाते. तो एक बड़ा सा डेटाबेस क्रिएट हुआ. अब जब वो रजिस्टर कर रहे हैं जीएसटी के साथ, तो एक टाइप की फॉर्मलाइजेशन ऑफ इकोनॉमी भी शुरू हो गई. ओके, सो इट ऑल्सो स्टार्टेड द फॉर्मलाइजेशन ऑफ इकोनॉमी. ओके, and then there is substantially reducing cascading of taxes by providing seamless flow of input tax credit in the entire supply chain and also lowering the cost of goods and services. Now what does this mean? We will be discussing with the concept of input tax credit only. Then the fifth objective is reduce the logistics and transportation cost by barrier free movement of goods across India. This is because of e-way bills. E-way bills. Those who used to travel across state borders must have seen the long line of trucks standing there just at the Naka or Chowki because they have to get their goods inspected. Now because of e-way bills, this is only digitized, all this are digitized, and because of that there can be seamless movement of goods across the borders of the state. तो इससे क्या होगा? Logistics and transportation costs will reduce. What will happen is that logistics and transportation costs will reduce. Okay. Now, indirect taxes. What I just said, before the GST, there were plethora of taxes. There were so many taxes across in different states, and even in the central government, there were different types of indirect taxes, such as center used to levy service tax, custom duty, excise duty, central sales tax, and then state was sales tax, value added tax, entertainment tax, luxury tax, entry tax, taxes on betting and gambling. So these different taxes were levied by center and states. Now as a businessman you have to keep in mind कि कितने सारे taxes हैं जिसके साथ हमें compliance करना है, कितने सारे returns हमें भरने पड़ेंगे हर साल. So as a businessman you have to keep in mind that there are so many compliances with which you have to comply and you have to fill so many returns. So it will take off your mind of the core business idea of yours and it will be a distraction, and hence it will drastically reduce the ease of doing business in India. तो इसके देखते हुए GST इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ ताकि ये सारे टैक्सेस, इनमें से कई सारे टैक्सेस कैन बी सब्ज्यूम्ड अंडर द अम्ब्रेला ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज टैक्स. ओके, नाउ composition of GST. Composition of GST. GST is composed of three types of taxes. The first is SGST, second is CGST, and third is IGST. Within a state, there is a dual GST structure. Dual GST structure बोले तो कि एक स्टेट के अंदर कॉमर्स हो रही है. मान लीजिए कोई स्टेट है एंड कॉमर्स इसी स्टेट के अंदर हो रही है. कॉमर्स इज बीइंग टेकन प्लेस इन दिस स्टेट ओनली, से प्लेस A to place B. Okay, there are two cities A and B. Now the commerce is being taken place within this state only. Now इसमें dual GST का structure लगेगा जिसमें जिसमें SGST प्लस CGST होगा। ओके, नाउ जैसे आप देखते हैं, इफ यू गो टू ईट इन अ रेस्टोरेंट and you take the bill, you will see that there is a CGST and there is a SGST. The CGST is of 2.5% and then there is SGST of 2.5%. तो यही चीज है जिसे हम कह रहे हैं dual GST structure within the single state. ठीक है, and then IGST is applied when there is a interstate movement of goods and services. Say there is a different state and यहां से यहां पर कोई अगर goods आ रहे हैं, if a movement of goods is from some other state to other state, then the IGST will be applied. On that. Okay, and why dual GST structure? It is very easy to understand. So as to maintain the center state harmony, so as to promote the fiscal federalism. Okay, so this is what GST is composed of. What are the salient features of GST? There is clarity in definition, that when would be GST applied. Point of taxation will be supply. So before the GST regime, there were different types of taxes at which there were different definitions कि वो tax कब apply होगा. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, एक्साइज ड्यूटी अप्लाई होती थी रिमूवल ऑफ गुड्स पे, वैट होता था सेल्स पे. तो ऐसी चीजों को हटा के वी हैव जस्ट मेड अ सिंगल डेफिनेशन दैट इट इज बेस्ड ऑन द प्रिंसिपल ऑफ डेस्टिनेशन बेस्ड कंजम्पशन टैक्सेशन. यानी कि आपका जहां पे कंज्यूम हो रही है गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, वहां पे ये टैक्स अप्लाई होगा. सिंपल एंड क्लियर डेफिनेशन इज प्रोवाइडेड विद इन द एक्ट. ओके, so this is the first salient feature. Dual GST we have already discussed. GST is being levied at 4 rates, 5, 12, this is not 16, 18 होगा ये, and 28%, and then elimination of tax cascading effect in the supply chain. Tax cascading हम अभी just देखेंगे. ठीक है, now GST and constitution का क्या संबंध है? What is the relation between GST and constitution? What are the constitutional provisions related to GST in India? So we already saw that the constitutional amendment was passed in 2016. I beg your pardon. So the constitutional amendment was passed in 2016. It was the 101st Amendment Act. ये था 101वां संशोधन. And key features of the amendment was concurrent jurisdiction for levy and collection of GST by the center and the states under Article 246A, and center to levy and collect IGST on supplies in the course of interstate trade or commerce including imports. So IGST का हमने क्या देखा? IGST is levied when there is interstate commerce, यानी कि एक स्टेट से दूसरे स्टेट के बीच में जब ट्रेडिंग हो रही है तब हमने IGST अप्लाई किया. एंड when there is import of goods, so import plus interstate commerce, तो हमने ये देखा. एंड कॉम्पेंसेशन फॉर लॉस ऑफ रेवेन्यू, ये एक अलग एक्ट बनाया गया. सी, बिफोर दैट स्टेट्स के पास पावर थी कि दे कैन लिवाई टैक्सेस ऑन डिफरेंट थिंग्स थ्रू वैल्यू एडेड टैक्स. नाउ द सेंटर आस्क्ड द स्टेट टू गिव अप दैट पावर. In return, states ने कहा, the state said that okay, we are going to give up that power, but you have to compensate for us. You have to compensate to us for that giving up of power. तो ये एक compensation आया GST का. ठीक है, for 5 years, the center has to provide compensation to states. Okay, and we will be seeing that what is the criteria in the coming slides. Okay. And GST on petroleum, crude, high speed. So these are the commodities which are outside the ambit of GST for now, and decision will be taken by the Goods and Services Tax Council, that is GST Council, whether they can be brought under the ambit of GST or not. Okay. And what are the different articles? 366 12A. It defines the Goods and Services Tax on any tax or goods, supply of goods or services or both, except taxes on the supply of alcoholic liquor for human consumption. It is very important to remember this because this exemption is provided in the Constitution Amendment only. Okay, ये संविधान में provided है exemption. What? Alcohol or liquor for human consumption. बाकी पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट्स हैं वो जीएसटी काउंसिल कर सकती है कि हां हम इसको अपने जीएसटी के एम्बिट में ले आते हैं, बट दिस एग्जेम्पशन इज प्रोवाइडेड अंडर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. It is provided under constitution. So if you have to remove this exemption, you have to amend the constitution. आपको संशोधन करना पड़ेगा संविधान में, तब जाके आप इसको हटा पाएंगे. Again, Article 366(12) it defines what are goods, which includes all material commodities and article. And 366(26)(a) it defines what are services, and 366(26)(b) about the state. Okay, so these are some constitutional provisions. You don't have to remember that. The only fact that you need to remember from this is that there is an exemption under the constitution for the GST application on liquor or human consumption. ये भी ध्यान रखिएगा कि it is liquor for human consumption. Okay, for human consumption. ये industries के consumption के लिए नहीं है, for human consumption है. ठीक है. Now डुअल जीएसटी विद इन स्टेट, व्हाट वी वर डिस्कसिंग. अब हम वो देखेंगे कि हम एक स्टेट के बारे में बात करने वाले हैं. अब वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट वन स्टेट ओनली, सच एज द एग्जांपल इज दैट ऑफ टिम्बर मेकर. ठीक है, टिम्बर मेकर, इसने द टिम्बर मेकर सोल्ड द टिम्बर टू फर्नीचर मेकर एट द कॉस्ट ऑफ 100 rupees. At the cost of 100 rupees, and SGST and CGST, let's say that it is levied at the rate of 10%. कि 10% की दर से SGST भी लेवाई हो रहा है और CGST भी लेवाई हो रहा है. ठीक है, और 100 रुपए की टिम्बर इसने बेची, तो फर्नीचर मेकर को ये कितने की पड़ेगी? What would be the invoice to the furniture maker? Please tell in the comments. What would be the cost of timber to the furniture maker? Bittu is saying 120, Kannu is saying 120, Shreyans is saying 120. Okay, good. Malvika is saying 120. Good, good. So 120 का पड़ा. अब इसमें SGST का component is 10 rupees and 10 rupees is for the CGST component. Okay. Now who will deposit this tax? The furniture maker or the timber maker? The furniture maker or the timber maker, who will deposit this tax to the government? Please tell me in the chat box. Timber maker. Good, good. So timber maker is depositing the SGST and CGST of rupees 10 each to the government. तो पहली चीज तो यही तो इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स है कि कंज्यूम ये कर रहे हैं, आपने उसको पैसा दिया एंड ये जमा कर रहे हैं. द टिम्बर मेकर इज डिपॉजिटिंग SGST एंड CGST टू द गवर्नमेंट. द फर्स्ट थिंग इज दैट. नाउ फर्नीचर मेकर ने अपना फर्नीचर बनाया. द फर्नीचर मेकर नाउ हैज मेड द फर्नीचर एंड सेल इट टू द फर्नीचर रिटेलर. लेट्स से दे आर सेलिंग इट फॉर द कॉस्ट ऑफ रुपीज 200. SGST एंड CGST आर सेम. ओके, 10% का लग रहा है. नाउ कितना SGST जाएगा और कितना CGST जाएगा? कितना SGST जाएगा और कितना CGST जाएगा? 200 पे 10% कितना कितना होगा? 2020. गुड. एंड हु विल डिपॉजिट द टैक्स टू द गवर्नमेंट? Who will deposit it to the government? Furniture maker or the furniture retailer? Furniture maker. Good. Furniture maker will deposit it to the government, both the SGST and CGST. Okay. अब दोनों ने डिपॉजिट कर दिया, बट क्या है कि फर्नीचर मेकर ने पहले भी तो एक इनपुट दे रखा था. मतलब जब पहले उसने खरीदा फर्नीचर मेकर ने लकड़ी को, when the furniture maker bought the timber from the market, there was already tax incident on that, rupees 10. Now when it is selling it to the furniture retailer, there is rupees 20 tax. But the furniture maker will make a case that I will get input tax credit of rupees 10 because I have added value of that much only. उसके बाद input tax credit मिलेगा और SGST एक्चुअली में इतना जाएगा. पहले 20-20 रुपए जा रहा था, पर फर्नीचर मेकर ने पहले भी तो एक टैक्स दे रखा है ना, दे हैव गिवन अ टैक्स ऑफ ₹10 बिफोर, तो वो एक इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट की तरह जाएगा और SGST जाएगा एक्चुअली में ₹10। ठीक है, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि एक्चुअली में जो पहले टैक्स दिया हुआ है उसके ऊपर टैक्स नहीं लग रहा है, द टैक्स इज ऑन द वैल्यू एडिशन बाय द फर्नीचर मेकर ओनली। समझे आप ये चीज? मैं फिर से समझाता हूं। टिम्बर मेकर से फर्नीचर मेकर ने लकड़ी खरीदी, फर्नीचर मेकर ने 100 रुपए की लकड़ी खरीदी, 100 रुपए का अपना वैल्यू एडिशन करके फर्नीचर रिटेलर को बेचा, तभी तो 200 का बना। 100 ऑफ टिम्बर, 100 रुपीज ऑफ टिम्बर प्लस 100 रुपीज ऑफ वैल्यू एडिशन जो उसने खुद करा अपनी स्किल्स के थ्रू, उसके बाद 200 में बेचा फर्नीचर रिटेलर को। तो वैल्यू एडिशन कितने का हुआ? वैल्यू एडिशन हुआ ओनली ऑफ ₹100, है ना, और ₹100 का वैल्यू एडिशन हुआ है, तो हम टैक्स बस वैल्यू एडिशन पर ही लगा रहे हैं, हम टैक्स बस वैल्यू एडिशन पर ही लगा रहे हैं। ओके, वरना क्या होता कि 120 का यहां पर इसको पड़ता, 120 का पड़ता, 120 के ऊपर 10% लगता 100 का एडिशन करके, बट नहीं, हम बस वैल्यू एडिशन पर टैक्स लगा रहे हैं। ये है इसका कॉन्सेप्ट, और ये किसके थ्रू हो रहा है? क्योंकि उसे इनपुट टैक्स का क्रेडिट मिल जा रहा है, क्योंकि उसने पहले भी टैक्स दिया था यहां पे। ओके, तो ये है इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट का कॉन्सेप्ट कि खाली वैल्यू एडिशन पर हो रहा है। 10% ऑफ ₹100 कितना हुआ? 10% ऑफ ₹100 हुआ ₹10, जो कि SGST में जा रहा है, एंड 10% अगेन फॉर CGST ऑन वैल्यू एडिशन ऑफ ₹100, वो CGST में सेंटर को जा रहा है। तो 100 का 10 और 10 इधर गया। ओके, तो वैल्यू एडिशन पे टैक्स लग रहा है। ये है इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट का कॉन्सेप्ट कि पहले जो टैक्स दिया है उसको माफ करके उसको इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट मिल जाएगा, और जो वैल्यू एडिशन हुआ है बस उसी पे टैक्स लगेगा। वरना क्या होगा कि जो पहले टैक्स दिया है फिर उस पे भी टैक्स लग जाएगा। तो इसे कहेंगे हम कास्केडिंग ऑफ टैक्स, कास्केडिंग ऑफ टैक्स। वन ऑफ द ऑब्जेक्टिव of introducing goods and services tax in India was to remove the cascading. Okay, was to remove the cascading. Now the similar case will take place with the final consumer. उसके साथ भी ये होगा, यहाँ पे जो दिया है आपका उसका input tax credit मिल जाएगा, and then this will go on. So the input tax credit makes sure that goods and services tax is levied on value addition at each step, not on the whole product but at value addition. Okay, so this is the concept of input tax credit. Now let's move forward. These are some examples of how GST works. Let's say the first case is sale in one state, resale in the same state. कि पहले एक ही स्टेट में सेल हुई है, उसके बाद वहीं पे दूसरी बार रीसेल होगी। Let's say in Mumbai the sale price was 100 rupees, SGST CGST 8 रुपए गया। इसमें दिखाया है इंफोग्राफिक से कि CGST गया है सेंटर के पास, SGST गया है स्टेट के पास, ₹8, एंड देन यहां पे पुणे में आया गुड, यहां पे सेल प्राइस ₹200 है, SGST CGST अगेन इंपोज हुआ और इनपुट SGST मिल गया जिसकी वजह से 8 हो रहा है। अगेन टेल मी दैट कि यहां पे 8 से 200 पे गया, तो वैल्यू एडिशन कितना हुआ? वैल्यू एडिशन इसका कितना है? बी का कितना वैल्यू एडिशन है? कितना वैल्यू एडिशन किया बी ने? टेल मी इन द चैट बॉक्स कि हाउ मच वैल्यू एडिशन वाज डन बाय द बी, because the person in A is selling their product at Mumbai at ₹100. He or she bought it, and then B is selling it at ₹200. Now tell me what is the value addition? It is 100, and 100 पे 8% कितना होगा? 100 पे 8% कितना होगा SGST का? What would be the 8% of SGST on ₹100? It will be 8. तो यही तो हो रहा है कि 8% SGST का लग रहा है वैल्यू एडिशन पे, बट ये मेक श्योर कैसे हो रहा है? इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट के थ्रू, क्योंकि पिछला वाला जो टैक्स भरा है उसका हमें क्रेडिट मिल जा रहा है। दिस इज द कॉन्सेप्ट। ओके, आई होप ऑल ऑफ यू अंडरस्टूड। नाउ this is the second case where the sale in one state, resale in another state. This is only to show you guys that there will be a component of IGST that will be introduced when the goods will be sold from Bhopal to Lucknow, that is from Madhya Pradesh to Uttar Pradesh. When the goods will be sold, there will be a component of IGST. There will be component of what? IGST. Similarly, sale outside the state and resale in that state, that is when a sale is made from Delhi to Jaipur, that is from Delhi to Rajasthan, there will be IGST levied at the rate of 16%. Remember that in this particular example, SGST was at 8% and CGST was at 8%. Now IGST is being levied at 16%. दूसरे स्टेट में सेल हुआ, देन जयपुर के बाद जोधपुर में सेल हुआ, जोधपुर इज इन द सेम स्टेट ओनली ऑफ राजस्थान, तो वहां पे लेवाई हुआ CGST एंड SGST. Okay, and input tax credit of IGST was claimed. I hope all of you understood this concept of how GST works. हमें बहुत ज्यादा डेप्थ में नहीं जाना है, हमें इसे यूपीएससी के पर्सपेक्टिव से समझना है. ओके, कि यूपीएससी में जो क्वेश्चंस आए वो सॉल्व हो जाए. Now, these are the taxes that were subsumed under the GST structure. The central taxes and state taxes. You have to remember this list. You have to by heart this list because it is important. A question may come that what are the taxes which were subsumed and which were the taxes which were not subsumed. You have to by heart this list. Okay. And these are the taxes which were not subsumed under GST. Don't worry, you will be getting this as a PDF on our Telegram channel. So download it from there and read it later. Okay. And I may read it out to you. The taxes which were not subsumed under GST include basic custom duty, central excise on petroleum products, anti-dumping duty, VAT on alcohol for human consumption, stamp duty, property tax and professional tax. Okay. Now, pre-GST and pre-GST indirect tax structure in India, it just shows that there were so many taxes before GST and after GST there was single tax, that is GST. There was single tax administration, a uniform law and a computerized uniform procedures. The infographics is here to show you just that. Before GST, there were so many taxes that were being levied and after GST, it becomes so simple. It becomes so simple to fill your taxes and to comply with the existing law of the land. Okay. Now, what is outside GST? It is important for you to remember this. Alcohol for human consumption. हमने ये देखा कि इसकी पावर स्टेट के साथ है. अभी भी स्टेट अल्कोहल पे वैट लेवाई करते हैं. ओके, तो अल्कोहल इज आउटसाइड जीएसटी. 5 पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट्स, ये जीएसटी की काउंसिल डिसाइड करेगी कि व्हेन वी हैव टू इंट्रोड्यूस दीज प्रोडक्ट्स अंडर द एम्बिट ऑफ जीएसटी. द पावर इज विद जीएसटी काउंसिल. दिस वाज मेंशन्ड अंडर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ इंडिया. वो संविधान में मेंशन्ड है, ये जीएसटी काउंसिल के पास पावर है कि कब इंट्रोड्यूस करना है. टोबैको इज अ पार्ट ऑफ जीएसटी. टोबैको इज अ पार्ट ऑफ जीएसटी, बट सेंटर इस पे अभी भी और टैक्स लिवाई कर सकता है. मैक्सिमम स्लैब क्या है जीएसटी की? 28% है. बट बेग योर पार्डन, द मैक्सिमम स्लैब इज ऑफ 28%, राइट? बट द सेंटर कैन levy additional excise duty on the tobacco products, but still it is under the ambit of GST. It is under GST. Okay. Entertainment tax levied by local bodies, the power remains with the local bodies. अब आप इस चीज को मेंशन किस चीज में कर सकते हैं कि हम लोकल पावर बॉडीज को कैसे एम्पावर कर सकते हैं, उनके फाइनेंसेस को कैसे बूस्ट कर सकते हैं. So this is outside GST. Again, this is important to remember. Now we are moving to the GST terminology कि GST के साथ क्या क्या टर्म्स यूज होती हैं. The first is revenue neutral rate. Revenue neutral rate बहुत ही सिंपल है. It is very simple to understand the revenue neutral rate. It just means when you are exchanging one regime, one taxation regime for another taxation regime, तो आपको उसका कितने परसेंट पे टैक्स रखना पड़ेगा कि आपका टैक्स ना ज्यादा हो ना कम हो. That is neutral रहे आपका कनेक्शन. Revenue neutral rate refers to taxing procedure that allows the government to still receive the same amount of money despite the changes in tax laws. अब ये क्यों हमें जरूरत पड़ी? We got to know about this because there was a change in tax laws. Pre-GST there was several different laws of taxes and after GST there was single. So हमें इसकी जरूरत पड़ी कि हम पता लगाएं कि what is the revenue neutral rate, what is that rate of taxation under GST that should be levied, जिसकी वजह से same amount of money अभी भी गवर्नमेंट कलेक्ट कर सके. इसका मतलब है revenue neutral rate. Okay. Now let's see the next terminology. It is composition scheme. Now not everyone is a very big बिजनेसमैन, कुछ लोगों के टर्नओवर्स कम होते हैं, but under GST you have to file monthly returns, okay, and then annual returns and then final returns. तो इतने सारे रिटर्न फाइल करने पड़ते हैं. तो व्हाट द छोटे बिजनेसमैन ने क्या कहा कि हमें इतने रिटर्न फाइल नहीं कर रहे क्योंकि हमारा टर्नओवर इतना नहीं है. हम क्या करेंगे, आपको एक फिक्स रेट ऑफ टैक्सेशन पे आपको टैक्स जमा कर देंगे, ठीक है, जस्ट कंसिडर दैट, एंड हम क्वार्टरली रिटर्न फाइल करेंगे प्लस 1 एनुअल रिटर्न. सो द आइडिया ऑफ कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम इज टू सिंप्लीफाई, इट इज टू सिंप्लीफाई GST even more. It is to simplify GST even more. So if any business is having turnover less than 1.5 crores, they are eligible for composition scheme. अब इसमें दो चीजें बहुत हैं इंपॉर्टेंट याद करने के लिए. द फर्स्ट इज दैट कि इसमें आपको इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट क्या, कि जैसे हम पहले देख रहे थे कि अगर आपने अभी टैक्स भरा है, उसके बाद जो पहले आपने टैक्स भरा था उसको माइनस करके आप बस वैल्यू एडिशन पे टैक्स भर रहे हो, आपको इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. फर्स्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग टू रिमेंबर अबाउट दिस इज दैट. एंड द सेकेंड इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग टू रिमेंबर अबाउट दैट इज कि ये बस इंट्रा स्टेट के लिए है, तो ये काफी लोकलाइज बिजनेस के लिए, इट इज फॉर लोकलाइज बिजनेस, इट इज नॉट फॉर इंटर स्टेट कॉमर्स. तो इसका डिसएडवांटेज यही है कि ये आपके बिजनेस को लोकलाइज कर देता है. एडवांटेज ये है कि इट मेक्स कंप्लायंस इजियर, इट मेक्स कंप्लायंस इजियर. ओके, सो इसमें एवरी पर्सन रजिस्टर्ड विल हैव टू फाइल रिटर्न्स इन सम फॉर्म और द अदर. अ रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन विल हैव टू फाइल रिटर्न्स ईदर मंथली और क्वार्टरली बेसिस. सो इसमें हमें क्या पता चल रहा है कि कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम में वी हैव टू फाइल क्वार्टरली रिटर्न्स. ओके, नाउ द सेकंड, दिस इज फ्रॉम द FAQ, frequently asked question of GST on their site. So we have obtained this information from there only, so it is very credible information. And can the customer who buys from a registered person is under composition scheme claim composition tax as input tax credit? इसका भी उन्होंने आंसर किया है GST काउंसिल ने कि नहीं, they cannot claim input tax credit on composition scheme. So ये दो चीजें बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है जो आपको याद करके रखनी है composition scheme से related. Okay, now the next terminology that you need to know about is reverse charge mechanism. Reverse charge mechanism or RCM. What reverse charge mechanism is that कि सारे लोग GST के एम्बिट में नहीं हो सकते. इट्स नॉट नेसेसरी द होल सप्लाई चेन इज रजिस्टर्ड विद GST काउंसिल, इज रजिस्टर्ड ऑन GST नेटवर्क, आई बेग योर पार्डन. सो अगर ऐसा कोई होता है कि सप्लाई चेन में कोई एक सप्लायर है जो GST नेटवर्क पे रजिस्टर्ड नहीं है, तो उसका टैक्स कौन जमा करेगा? क्योंकि क्या होता है जब A है और B है, ठीक है, और लेट्स सी थ्रू द नेक्स्ट इंफोग्राफिक ओनली. या supplier of goods and services is there, receiver of goods and services there. Now the receiver of goods and services will pay the indirect tax, and who will deposit it? Please answer in the chat box. Who will deposit the GST with the government? Is it the supplier or is it the receiver? Receiver is paying the tax, but who is depositing it with the government? Please answer in the chat box. Supplier is depositing it with the government. Good. Shreyans is saying supplier, Kanu is saying supplier, Bittu is saying suppliers. Good. So supplier is it depositing it with the government. But what would happen अगर supplier ही registered ना हो GST network पे? Then what would happen? तो उस कंडीशन को हम कहेंगे reverse charge mechanism, कि supplier ने provide की goods and services, receiver ने goods and services के price दिया, and GST कौन जमा कर रहा है? It is the receiver of goods and services who is depositing GST with the government. The process has been reversed. यहां पे supplier कर रहा था, यहां पे receiver कर रहा है, and hence the name reverse charge mechanism. ये है इसका concept कि what is reverse charge mechanism. Let's see the statements. It means the liability to pay tax is on the recipient of the supply of goods and services instead of the supplier of such goods or services. In case of receipt of goods supplier from unregistered person, that's what there is an unregistered person in the supply chain, and that is why reverse charge mechanism is being invoked. Okay, can GST paid on reverse charge basis be considered as input tax? Yes, the definition of input tax includes the tax payable under the reverse charge. So input tax किस पे payable नहीं था, composition scheme पे, और input tax किस में consider हो जाएगा, इसमें reverse charge पे input tax consider हो जाएगा. So see the difference. These are the kinds of statements that may come on the prelims exam. Okay, तो इसमें ही आपको याद करना पड़ेगा कि क्या ट्रू है क्या फॉल्स है, एंड सेलेक्ट द स्टेटमेंट एंड ऑप्शन अकॉर्डिंगली. नाउ द नेक्स्ट टर्मिनोलॉजी दैट इज एसोसिएटेड विद जीएसटी, जो कभी कभी आर्टिकल्स में आती है, वो है टैक्स बुयंसी. इट इज द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द चेंजेस इन गवर्नमेंट्स टैक्स रेवेन्यू विद ग्रोथ इन जीडीपी. अब इसका क्या मतलब है कि इफ देयर इज ग्रोथ इन द इकोनॉमी, तो अगर ग्रोथ हो रही है इकोनॉमी में, अर्थव्यवस्था में अगर बढ़ोतरी हो रही है, तो इसका नेचुरल मीनिंग ये है कि आपका टैक्स भी बढ़ना चाहिए, क्योंकि अब लोगों के पास ज्यादा पैसा आ रहा है, लोगों के पास ज्यादा पैसा आ रहा है और कॉमर्स भी बढ़ रही है, कि ट्रांजैक्शंस भी बढ़ रहे हैं. तो डायरेक्ट टैक्स क्योंकि लोगों के पास ज्यादा इनकम है, इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स क्योंकि कॉमर्स और ट्रांजैक्शंस बढ़ रहे हैं, दोनों ही चीजें बढ़नी चाहिए. तो इसे हम कहते हैं टैक्स बॉयंसी. और अगर जो टैक्स के बढ़ने की जो दर है, द रेट ऑफ चेंज इन इंक्रीज ऑफ टैक्सेशन, द टैक्स कलेक्शन is more than what is the growth of GDP, then we can say that it is highly buoyant. Relationship between the changes in government's tax revenue growth and changes in GDP, ये definition है buoyancy की. It is an indicator of the efficiency and responsiveness of tax revenue. It is calculated as a ratio of percentage growth in tax revenues to the percentage growth in GDP. Okay, tax is said to be buoyant if the gross tax revenue, if the gross tax revenue is increases more than proportionately under the response of rise in GDP figures. यानी कि GDP जितनी बढ़ रही है उससे ज्यादा अगर टैक्स कलेक्शन बढ़ रहा है, तो उसे हम कहेंगे कि टैक्स बॉयंट है. और ये एक एडवांटेज हुआ है जीएसटी का कि इसकी वजह से टैक्स बॉयंसी इंक्रीज हुई है. ओके, सो एग्जाम्पल भी दे रखा है, thus if even 1% of the rise in national income results in more than 1% rise in tax revenues from a certain tax, then it can be said that tax is highly buoyant. It is important to remember what buoyancy is. Now the next thing that you need to know about is zero rating. Zero rating is also very easy to understand, very easy to understand. देखिए दो चीजें होती हैं, एक होता है टैक्स से एग्जेम्पशन, एक होता है आपका जीरो रेटिंग. नाउ मान लीजिए कि किसी गारमेंट पे डिक्लेयर कर दिया जीएसटी काउंसिल ने कि इट इज एग्जेम्प्टेड फ्रॉम टैक्स. So there is a tax exemption on garments. Let's suppose, okay, let's suppose there is a garment on which GST Council has declared exemption. तो इसका मतलब जब ये garment sell होगा तो इसके ऊपर टैक्स लेवाए नहीं होगा. So it means that when this garment will be sold, okay, I will teach in English only, then it means that when this garment is sold, it won't attract GST. But what would happen is that the wool that has gone in the making of this garment, the tax will be levied at this stage. It is not tax exempted, the garment is tax exempted. So what zero rating means, zero rating essentially means the entire supply chain is exempted. The entire supply chain is exempted. It means that if the garment is zero rated, the tax won't be levied on garment, but the tax won't be levied on wool also. Okay, so all supply chain will be exempted from taxation, and that is why we are calling it zero rating. So this is the concept behind zero rating, and it is said that exports are zero rated. Exports are zero rated under the GST regime. It essentially means that all the taxes that had gone into the export of a product, they will be returned back to the supplier. So this is what zero rating of export means, and why this is being done, so as to promote exports of goods and services outside the country. It will improve the current account deficit position of our country. Okay, so this is what zero rating means. Now let's see the GST Council, the organization that upholds and regulates the GST structure in India. GST Council. It has been established under the 279A(1) and introduced through 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. Article 279(4) GST rates to the union and states are recommended by GST Council, that it is one of the functions of GST Council to recommend the state, to recommend the rates of GST, okay, and the decision making is done through this process. The process is what? There should be a quorum of 50% of the members should be there to make any deposit. The question is, sir, how current account deficit is improved by zero rating? See, current account deficit means there is a current account deficit when the imports are high than the exports. So if there is zero rating on export, it means that the exports are cheaper. They are cheaper. And when they are cheaper, it means that they are more competitive in the international market. If they are more competitive in the international market, it will encourage the export sector of our country. Then it will increase the exports of our country, and eventually the exports will increase and the current account deficit will reduce. So this is the concept behind this. Okay, good. Kandu is answering the right answer. So now the decision making of the GST Council, is done through a quorum of 50% of the members. कि आधे council वहां पे present होनी जरूरी है when the decision is being taken, and the decision is taken by the 3/4 majority, यानी कि 75% votes चाहिए किसी भी decision को effective करने के लिए. To make any decision effective, there should be 3/4 majority. And the weightage of central government and states, these are different. Now you will see what is the catch-22 situation here. कि central government के पास कितनी weightage है, voting power कितनी है? What is the weightage of voting power with the central government? It is 1/3. And with the rest of the states, the voting power is 2/3. Now, if the center does not want any resolution to be passed in this council, it can simply not vote. So there is a virtual veto, because for majority to pass any resolution, you need to have 3/4, but the center has a voting power of 1/3. So if a center is not interested in passing a resolution, the maximum vote of you can get is of 66%. 66%, because 1/3 is 33% only. So there is a virtual veto with the center. No resolution can be passed if center does not agree on that. So GST Council में एक asymmetrical federalism भी देखने को मिलती है. We can see a kind of asymmetrical federalism in the GST Council. Now, who is the chairperson of GST Council? It is Union Finance Minister. The Union Minister of State in charge of Revenue or Finance is member. Similarly, the members are from the state also, their finance minister or person nominated by them. The vice chairperson is selected by the members of the council from one amongst themselves. And who is the ex officio secretary? It is the revenue secretary. Revenue secretary as the ex officio secretary to the GST. So this is the composition of GST Council. Now, what is the significance of GST Council? First, it brings uniformity. One nation, one tax. The center and states, they are coming together to promulgate uniform regulations for one nation, one tax. So uniformity आती है. Fiscal federalism, it acts as a platform for coming together of center and state. Just like interstate council, GST Council is an epitome of fiscal federalism. Then there is ease of doing business. It promotes ease of doing business because it makes the GST rates more predictable. It brings more transparency into the working of the system. And then there is competitive federalism, that when different states come together on the GST Council platform, there is kind of competition going on between them with respect to the collection of tax. So if one state is collecting more tax and the other state is not able to collect that much tax, so there is a competition, a hidden competition going on between the states so that they can collect as much tax as possible. So इसमें we can see fiscal federalism and competitive federalism. Now recently 47th meeting of GST Council was organized in Chandigarh, in which different decisions were taken. The largely decision was taken with through the modification of tax slabs, not tax slabs but the different products that fall into that tax slab. So the upward changes were including 17 goods and services. At the same time, tax was reduced on some products. You can see this list through the PIB, which I will be linking along with this document on our Telegram channel. and there were several different decisions also, such as modification in GST IT system to bolster compliance and reduce tax evasion. This means कि इसके IT सिस्टम को और स्ट्रेंथन किया गया है ताकि बेटर कंप्लायंस किया जा सके और टैक्स इवेजन को रोका जा सके. So these are a list of some products on which tax has been changed, such as on knives, spoons, forks, the tax has been changed from 12 to 18%. Similarly, on LED lamps, 12 to 18%, and solar water heater in system, 5 to 12%, dairy machinery, 12 to 18%. So these tax changes are going to finally impact the common people only. So these are significant. You need not learn all of them, but just go through them. Okay. Now, the 47th meeting, yeah, again, there were some other decisions also, such as a long pending issue of constituting a GST appellate tribunal was decided through a group of ministers was formed to decide on this issue. तो ये भी 47th meeting में decision लिया गया. And the finance minister herself said that the tax changes, the rate of tax changes were being taken keeping in mind the inflation going on in the economy. Inflation means rise in general prices of goods and services. The RBI has taken the decision of increasing repo rate. Now that was on the monetary fund, है ना? That was on the monetary policy of the government. But on the fiscal policy of the government, you can just increase or decrease the tax slabs, tax rates. तो GST काउंसिल ने यही किया है कि कुछ प्रोडक्ट्स पे GST की दरें बढ़ा दी हैं, because of which inflation can be controlled to some extent. The GST Council has taken the decision to increase GST on some products so as to control the inflation in the economy. Okay, this is the fiscal policy. Now, GST compensation to states. We already talked about what is GST compensation to states. At the time of enactment, the states has to give some of their power to the center so that they can levy a uniform taxation across the country. Now the states in return ask that please assure us that you will be compensating us if the SGST is not growing at that rate that we think it would grow. So उन्होंने कहा कि if the taxation, the tax collection is not increasing at that percentage of 14%, then you compensate for us for the shortfall. तो ये है GST compensation to states का gist. This is the concept behind GST compensation to states, that if there is a shortfall in tax collection for the states, then the center will compensate them for this. During the transition period, states revenue was protected at 14% per annum over the base year revenue of 2015-16. Now remember this year as well. The base year for this GST compensation is 2015-16. Even at the time of introduction of value added tax, this concept was used. But what happened, what different happened this time was there was COVID pandemic, and because of COVID pandemic the tax collection were hampered. Now tax collection was hampered, it also means that the compensation to states was also hampered. So the states did not like the fact that they were not being compensated at the rate at which they were promised. Okay, so this is what happened during the COVID pandemic, and to solve this issue, the central government, they borrowed money from the market to compensate the states at the same rate of return. Okay, so GST is a single tax that replaces multiple or other indirect taxes. The center lose out its power to levy taxes such as excise duty, while the state could no longer levy entry tax, value added tax, etc. To allay the fears of states regarding loss of revenue, following mechanism was made. GST Compensation to States Act 2017 was created. Under the Act, the percentage of annual revenue growth of a state has been projected to be 14%. It was projected to be 14%. If the annual revenue growth of a state is less than 14%, the state is entitled to receive compensation under this law. So this is what the basic of GST compensation to state is. The compensation payable to a state shall be provisionally calculated and released at the end of every 2 months period. Okay, at the end of every 2 months period before it is calculated. Now, the generation of revenue under the act would happen through a GST compensation cess. Now, इसको compensate करने के लिए there is a GST compensation cess, there is a GST compensation fund. This GST compensation cess is levied on sin and luxury goods for 5 years. Now recently this has been increased to 2026. The center has increased the validity of GST compensation cess to 2026, but the period of compensation to states has lapsed now because it is 2022. The promise was of 5 years from the 2017 and 5 years has elapsed now. So now states will no longer be compensated for their loss of revenue, but at the same time the center will continue to collect GST compensation cess. ये चीज आपको यहां पे याद रखने की जरूरत है. You need to remember this fact. Okay, the entire cess collected during the year is required to be credited into a non-lapsable fund which is called GST compensation cess fund. Thus, collected compensation cess flows into the consolidated fund of India and is then transferred to the public account of India where GST compensation cess fund has been created. Okay, so the amount collected first flows into the consolidated fund of India, then it flows to the public accounts of India under which the GST compensation cess fund has been created. Okay, and it is about that only. After that, during the COVID pandemic, states found it difficult to obtain their compensation from the center. So there was a dispute regarding that. And even now at the 47th meeting, the states were asking the central government to continue with the compensation, but no decision has been taken regarding that. Okay. So should it be extended or not? You can read it later from this document because there are several reasons why this should be extended and against also. It can come as a mains question as well. Now the 5 years of GST. Now we are going to see the achievements of GST over the 5 years. अब हम देखेंगे 5 साल में क्या क्या पाया है GST ने. It has improved ease of doing business because it has made compliances with the tax more easier for the businesses. So ease of doing business has increased. Now if people can make good and easy compliance, it naturally means that more and more people will get attracted and they will not evade the taxes and they will increase. This will increase the India's tax base. So ये ease of doing business को increase कर रहा है. It is increasing the ease of doing business. Now revenue collection are also increasing. They are also increasing. अगर हम COVID pandemic को हटा दें तो we can see the revenue collection are increasing. This is April 2022. The April 2022 में कितना collection हुआ? 1,67,000 crores. In May 2022, 1,40,000 crores. In June 2022, it is 1,44,000 crores. So हम देख रहे हैं कि कितना ज्यादा कलेक्शन ऑलरेडी हो रहा है. हम 1 लाख करोड़ से ऊपर वाली लिमिट पे आ रहे हैं. इससे पहले क्या होता था कि 1 लाख करोड़ से नीचे नीचे कलेक्शन हो रहा था. अब 1 लाख करोड़ से ऊपर ऊपर हो रहा है. What used to happen before was that there was collection of tax below 1 lakh crore limit. Now we have breached that limit and continuously collecting GST more than 1 lakh crores. Okay, each month. It has improved the logistics also through what? A mechanism called e-way bills. E-way bills are nothing but they are digitally signed documents in which it is mentioned the word from where the goods are going and to the destination of the goods as well. तो इससे क्या होता है कि हमें पता है कि goods कहां से कहां travel कर रहे हैं and we use this facility during the COVID pandemic as well to track the movements of various goods and services. So it has increased the logistics efficiency. For example, a truck from Chennai to Jamshedpur carrying tires made by Apollo Tires reached in 3.5 days as state barriers began to be dismantled after the goods and services tax came into force. The same truck earlier would have taken 5 days. Ab 3.5 days. Okay. So you can see the logistics has improved and this is a headline from the 2017 Economic Times paper. So अब तो इससे भी ज़्यादा better time आ गया है. Okay. Further, the cost burden has reduced of compliance and transportation has also become more efficient because of which हमारी logistics cost कम होती जा रही हैं, because of which our logistics costs are coming down. Okay. Now this is about the e-way bill journey. E-way bill. So it means that you can see during the lockdowns there was a dip and now it is increasing only. So these are the achievements of e-way bill. It essentially resulted in faster movement of goods, increase in tax compliance, boost in GST revenue collection, ease of doing business also. Okay, and it has improved cooperative federalism because of GST Council. We already saw that. Okay, it has improved transparency. We saw that because this is all digitized in nature. You can see what is the amount of tax collected and what are the returns that have to be filed. So there is total transparency in the system now. And for people, it has meant that the cost of goods and services came down because of cascading of tax was not there anymore. The cascading of tax was not happening, so because of which the end consumers, they benefited from fall in prices of goods and services. So the people also benefited from that. And MSMEs also, the composition scheme we talked about. So there are various provisions for MSME also, who provide greatest employment in the country, not greatest in terms of total employment, because that is agriculture, but in the industrial sector, MSME, they provide good employment opportunities, they provide good export opportunities and good economic growth opportunities. So उनके लिए भी अलग-अलग जो है provisions बनाए गए for them also. There is a threshold of rupees 40 lakh for the supply of goods only. जिसके नीचे आपको थ्रेशोल्ड, जिसके नीचे आपको जीएसटी में रजिस्टर नहीं करना पड़ता, एंड अबव दैट यू हैव टू रजिस्टर्ड विद द जीएसटी नेटवर्क. सो देयर आर सेवरल डिफरेंट प्रोविजंस. composition scheme we already discussed about. Okay, now what are the challenges? The challenges include refund delay issues. There are some delay in refunds of tax as well as input tax credit, rate differentiation, the logic behind different rate on different products, we do not yet know what is the logic behind them. Lack of dispute redressal mechanism. GST Appellate Council, we already saw there is a committee of minister that has been set up to decide how to set up GST Appellate Council. Constant amendments are going on because the tax is still in its nascent stage. So these are some challenges that has to be addressed by the government. Okay, now let's move on to the question and answer session. Now we will be solving some questions and you will be writing down your marks whether you have solved it correctly or not. So this is the first question. Consider the following statements with reference to goods and services tax. GST is introduced as 101st Amendment Act. GST is an origin based tax on consumption of goods and services. The state's share of taxes on interstate commerce under GST goes to the exporting state. Now find out which are the incorrect statement. Please tell me in the chat box what are the incorrect statements. Please tell me in the chat box which are the incorrect statements. Is the first statement correct? 101st Amendment Act. Kanu is saying 2 and 3 are incorrect. Others are answering option B. Rohit has said B. Silvaka Kumar saying C. The Ritu is saying B. Rushi is saying B. What about others? Maitri is saying C. What about others? Please answer. 3 is incorrect. What about the second statement, Shreyans? Is the second statement correct or not? Is GST an origin based tax? Please ponder upon this point. Is GST an origin based tax or not? So the answer to this question is B. That is 2 and 3 are incorrect statements. GST is an destination based tax. It is a destination based tax. And logically, if there is interstate commerce, then the state's share should be going to the importing state because it is a destination based tax. So whoever has answered it correctly, write down +2, and others who have not answered it correctly, please make a negative marking for that. Now the next question is, which of the following is a part of GST structure? Input tax credit, value added tax, e-way bills, reverse charge mechanism. Please answer. It's a very easy question. Ritu is saying C, Kanu is saying C, Rohit is saying C, Bittu is saying C. Good. What about others? Silva Kumar is saying C. Good. Rushi is saying C. Shreyans is saying C. Good. The answer is C only. Again, write down your marks, and in the end we will be discussing that also. Now the next question is, the composition scheme under the goods and services tax has the following features. The composition scheme, which we just talked about, it is applicable to those business whose annual turnover is up to 1.5 crores. Under the scheme, tax rate for traders and manufacturers is 1% and for restaurants it is 5%. The scheme is optional in the sense that businesses under these threshold can opt to be covered under GST or covered under composite scheme. Tax paid by business under the scheme cannot charge this tax from customers. अब बताइए कि इसमें कौन सी स्टेटमेंट्स करेक्ट हैं और कौन सी रॉन्ग है. इट इज अ डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चन. नाउ ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस. Go statement by statement and use elimination technique. Kanu is saying D, Bittu is saying D, Rohit is saying D. What about others? Please answer. It's a difficult question, no? ये चीज तो आपको पहले ही पता चल गई कि फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट तो करेक्ट है ही. You already got to know that first statement is correct because it is present in all the options. Now what about the other statements? The scheme is optional or not? Is it mandatory for those who are under 1.5 crore turnovers? Is it optional or is it mandatory? Answer me this. Optional. Bittu is saying optional. Good. Optional. Okay. Optional. So we got to know the third statement is also correct. Okay. Now we are left with A or D. Tax paid by business under the scheme cannot charge this tax from customers. We actually did not discuss this statement, so it will be difficult for you to answer this. But the answer to this question is A. That is, it is a true statement that the tax paid by the businesses under the scheme cannot be charged from the customers. You will get to know about this when you will read the document that I'll be putting on the Telegram channel. Meanwhile, let's move on to the next question. Which of the following are potential benefits of goods and services tax? Reduction of cost of production making Indian goods and services more competitive, expansion of tax base in the country, creation of common market of goods and services in the country, and select the correct answer using the code given below. Please answer this question in the chat box. Kanu is saying D, Bittu is saying D, Ritu is saying D, Shreyans is saying D. So GST के benefits हैं ये, reduction of cost of production, making Indian goods and services more competitive. Good. ये हमारा पहले ही डिस्कस कर लिया था पॉइंट, वी ऑलरेडी डिस्कस दिस पॉइंट. एक्सपेंशन ऑफ टैक्स बेस, it is an advantage of GST. Creation of common market for goods and services in the country, it is also an advantage of GST. So the correct answer to this question is D. Okay. Now the next question. In reference to GST, which of the following statement is best description of revenue neutral rate? इसमें से कौन सी स्टेटमेंट बेस्ट डिस्क्रिप्शन है रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रल रेट की? प्लीज आंसर दिस. Bittu is saying C, Kanu is saying C, Maitri is saying C, Rohit is saying C, Selva Kumar is saying C, Shreyans is saying C. So the statement C is that allows government to receive same amount of money despite the changes in tax structure. So it is the correct statement. All of you have answered it correctly. Okay. Now the next, what are the most likely advantages of implementing goods and services tax? The first is it will replace multiple taxes collected by multiple authorities and will thus create a single market in India. The second is it will drastically reduce the current account deficit of India and will enable it to increase its foreign exchange reserves. And the third statement is it will enormously increase the growth and size of economy of India and will enable it to overtake China in the near future. Now, which of the following is the most likely advantages? What are the most likely advantages? See, this is an extreme statement. It will drastically reduce the current account deficit. Because of zero rated export, there will be somewhat decrease in current account deficit. Okay, but will it be drastic or not? It remains to be seen. GST को impose हुए 5 साल हो गए हैं. There are 5 years have went by that the GST has been imposed. Now, do you think there has been a drastic reduction in current account deficit or not? So here we are getting diversity of answers. Some are saying D, some are saying C, and some are saying A, and someone is saying B. Vivek is saying B. We all agree that the first statement is correct. It will replace multiple taxes collected by multiple authorities and will thus create a single market in India. First statement is correct. Second option फिर हटा देते हैं. B cannot be the answer. Now let's see what are the rest of the two statements. It will drastically reduce the current account deficit and will enable it to increase its foreign exchange reserves. See, it will improve the current account deficit position of India, but it won't be drastic. It is an extreme statement. Okay, so we have to steer clear of the extreme statements in the prelims examination, so it should not be true. And the third statement, it will enormously increase the growth and size of economy of India and will enable it to overtake China in the near future. Enormously increase. So let's see whether this statement is correct or not. Do you think this is a correct statement? It will enormously increase the growth and size of economy. It will increase, but will it be enormous? So the final answer of this question is A. The explanation of this question is exports will become zero rated under GST. So statements 2 and 3 would have been correct if the examiner had used moderate words. GST will help, but he or she has used extreme words. GST is unlikely to drastically reduce current account deficit. Okay, because it is dependent on other factors also, such as oil prices in the international market. Similarly, GST is unlikely to enormously increase the size of our economy. Okay, Because we already know what are the projected rate of growth by different institutions, World Bank and IMF. IMF projection 1 to 1.5% addition in growth rate. Okay, so if there is 1 to 1.5% increase in growth rate, addition in growth rate because of GST, it is not enormous. So we have to stand clear of extreme statements, and that is why the answer is A. Those who have marked it correct, please give yourself 2 marks, and those who have marked it incorrect, please deduct negative marking. Now the question 7 is, the GST passed by the government will be levied on which of the following products? It is again a very easy question. You can easily answer this. Please try to answer this. It's very easy. We already talked about this. Kanu is saying B. What about others? What are the answer of other students? Yes, all of you are answering the correct answer. The answer is B. Tobacco, on which the GST is levied. It comes under the regime of GST. Okay, for the rest of the 3 products, these petroleum products, 5 petroleum products on which the GST can be levied after there is a decision by a GST Council. So right now GST is not levied on these petroleum products, and that is why B is the correct answer. Now, introduction of GST is said to have increased tax buoyancy in India. Which of the following statements best explains the term tax buoyancy? We already talked about this topic. Can you answer this question as well? Please try to answer this. We talked about the tax buoyancy, no? Please try to answer this question. Ritu is saying D, Kanu is saying B, Giresh is saying D, Shreyans is saying B, Rushi is saying B, Maitri is saying B. So the majority of the students are saying B. Let's see what the answer to this question is and who is getting 2 marks. The answer to this question is B, because we talked about tax buoyancy. It means that if there is growth happening in the economy, the tax collection should also increase proportionately. Okay, it is not the other way around. It is when there is growth in the economy, the tax collection will also increase along with it, and hence the answer is B, because it means that any increase in growth results in proportionate increase in tax revenue. Okay. Next question. With reference to GST compensation, consider the following statements. GST compensation is to be paid to the states if the GST revenue growth is less than 10% year on year. Under GST Act, the compensation is to be paid for a period of 5 years. In case of shortfall in the GST compensation fund, the central government required to compensate the states from the Consolidated Fund of India. It's an average difficulty level question. आप पहली स्टेटमेंट का पता लगाइए. Is the first statement correct or not? Ankush is saying C. Ritu is saying C. What about others? Shreyans is answering no. Yes, because the figure here is 14%. So the first statement is automatically incorrect. The first statement is automatically incorrect. The second statement is correct because it was promised for a period of 5 years. The second statement is correct, first is incorrect. So we can eliminate option A, option D. Now we are left with option B and C. Now the main statement that is needed to be seen is that whether in case of shortfall of GST compensation fund, the central government is required to compensate the states from Consolidated Fund of India. ऐसा कोई promise किया है क्या central government ने? there is a separate fund created. You know about the fund, no? We already discussed about the fund. The fund is GST compensation fund and it is under the public accounts of India, है ना? So the answer to this question is B. Only the second statement is correct. Okay. So those who have answered this question correctly, again give yourself 2 marks. Now the last question is, consider the following statements regarding the reverse charge mechanism. Reverse charge is the mechanism under which the provider of goods or services is liable to pay to the tax instead of the recipient of goods and services. The RCM helps to check the tax evasion and expand the tax base of the government. It puts pressure on small businesses to voluntarily register on the goods and services network. अब बताइए इसमें कौन सी correct statement है या नहीं? We already talked about what is reverse charge mechanism. If you know the principle or concept behind the reverse charge mechanism, you can answer this question very easily. It's very easy question to answer if you know about the concept of reverse charge mechanism. What is the concept? Who pays the tax to the government? Is it the supplier or is it the receiver? Who pays the tax to the government under reverse charge? Is it the supplier or is it the receiver? Nandini is saying the C is the correct answer. Ankush is saying C is correct answer. What about others? What are your answers? Come on. Girish is saying C. Kanu is saying receiver. Yes, receiver deposits the tax with the government. No. Silva Kumar. No, in normal tax of GST, the supplier deposits the tax with the government. But Silva Kumar, under reverse charge, the name suggests that it is the reverse. That recipient or the receiver is depositing the tax with the government, not the supplier. Okay. 17 media is saying C, Bittu is saying receiver. Okay, good. Yes, it is based on who is not a part of GST chain. So, if you know that first statement is wrong, by elimination technique you can answer this question correctly and mark the option C, and the correct answer is C only. Okay. So with this we have reached the C is the main question. This is for you to answer. You can submit your answer on our website www.rajiasacademy.com. The question is, comment on the achievements of GST in the past 5 years of its functioning. You have to answer this in 150 words and 10 marks. Okay, as per the paper pattern of UPSC. Write this question down and you can submit your answers on our website. And one more announcement is there, that we are conducting HCS Prelims Test Series. It is free of cost and you can join this test series by scanning this QR code. It would be helpful for you, for those who are attempting HCS this year, and you will find it very helpful. So with this we have reached the end of our session. I hope you had a great learning experience and you learned a lot in this GST special session. I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you so much.